Did you know that right now, millions of gardeners around the world are wasting roughly 80% of their precious time waiting for a natural process that should actually only take a few short days? You have probably been told your entire life that turning crisp, fallen autumn leaves into rich, dark compost requires anywhere from 6 months to a full year of endless turning, watering, and exhausting physical labor. We have all stood over those massive, towering piles of dry, brown yard waste, feeling a heavy mix of hope and sheer frustration as the changing seasons tick by with barely any visible decomposition taking place. You rake, you pile, you sweat, and yet months later, you are still left with essentially the exact same crunchy leaves you started with, just slightly damper and heavier. But what if I told you that a profound biological shortcut has been existing right under our noses, waiting quietly to be unlocked? Imagine walking out into your backyard and pouring a completely natural homemade liquid over those stubborn leaf piles, watching them practically melt into deep black, nutrient-dense gold in a fraction of the traditional time. This is not some harsh chemical solvent cooked up in a sterile corporate laboratory designed to poison the earth while claiming to heal it. Instead, it is a raw, powerful, ecological secret that taps directly into the primal stomach of the forest floor. We are about to uncover a method so intensely effective that it will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about soil building and organic decay. Think about the sheer volume of organic matter that falls from the canopy every single autumn, and ask yourself how the ancient woodlands managed to digest mountains of foliage without anyone turning a plastic compost tumbler or adding synthetic nitrogen boosters. The forest has a secret stomach acid, and today you are going to learn exactly how to brew it in your own backyard using simple things you probably already possess. This revelation is going to transform you from a passive observer of slow decay into an active conductor of a raging biological symphony. Are you ready to stop fighting the agonizingly slow, traditional methods and start harnessing the most aggressive, microscopic allies nature has ever created? To truly understand the sheer power of what you are about to create, we must look back at a man who was literally thrown into a cold jail cell just for teaching everyday people how to brew this exact kind of biological magic. His name is Dr. Cho-Han Kyu, the pioneering father of Korean natural farming, and his story is one of the most suppressed chapters in modern agricultural history. Decades ago, while giant agrochemical corporations were busy convincing the entire world that the only way to grow food and break down organic matter was by purchasing their expensive synthetic powders, Dr. Cho was walking alone through the ancient, untouched mountain forests, observing the deep, undisturbed leaf litter. He noticed that the forest never needed chemical accelerators to digest its massive autumn leaf drop, because it relied on a hyperactive, invisible workforce of indigenous microorganisms. When Dr. Cho figured out a painfully simple way to capture, breed, and brew these aggressive forest microbes into a potent liquid form, he began teaching impoverished farmers how to do it completely for free. You can imagine the absolute panic this caused among the wealthy chemical monopolies who suddenly saw their profits violently threatened by a simple homemade brew. They used their vast political influence to brutally oppress him, mocking his groundbreaking discoveries as primitive pseudoscience, and ultimately having him arrested multiple times in a desperate attempt to stop the spread of his empowering knowledge. They wanted you and every other grower on Earth forever dependent on their plastic bottles of synthetic nitrogen to rot your compost and feed your soil. But the truth cannot be kept behind iron bars forever. The farmers who secretly continued brewing Dr. Cho liquid saw their stubborn piles of organic waste practically dissolve into rich, dark humus in a matter of days, not months. They were witnessing a microbiological fire that consumed dead leaves with terrifying efficiency. We are now standing on the shoulders of this persecuted hero, reclaiming the stolen science of natural rapid fermentation. By choosing to brew this liquid yourself, you are not merely doing seasonal yard work, you are actively participating in a quiet global rebellion against an industry that has profited from your patience and your wallet for far too long. Let us peer through an imaginary microscope for a moment to see exactly what happens when this living liquid touches a dry, dead leaf, because understanding this will change the way you look at your garden forever. You might be wondering how a simple homemade brew can physically melt tough, rigid carbon structures that normally take endless seasons to break down. The answer lies in a microscopic army and the biological equivalent of a massive energy drink. Traditional composting relies on whatever random airborne bacteria happen to lazily land on your yard waste, which is precisely why it takes so agonizingly long to see any real progress. But when you create this specific liquid, you are essentially brewing an extremely dense concentrated culture of lactic acid bacteria and aggressive indigenous fungi. Think of the tough, stubborn veins and stems of your autumn leaves as a rigid fortress built from complex organic compounds called cellulose and lignin. These walls are naturally designed to be incredibly hard to tear down to protect the tree while it is alive. However, when you drench your towering leaf pile in this secret liquid, you are instantly deploying billions of hungry, microscopic workers, armed with highly specific digestive enzymes. Because we brew this mixture with a sweet carbohydrate base like molasses or raw brown sugar, these microbes do not just gently wake up, they explode into an absolute state of hyperactive multiplication. The natural sugars act as a form of biological rocket fuel, propelling their metabolism and reproductive rates to staggering speeds. As they aggressively feed, they sweat out powerful organic acids that act like biological sledgehammers, smashing right through the tough cellular fortresses of the dead foliage. Instead of waiting for nature to slowly and passively oxidize the leaves over a freezing wet winter, you are intentionally sparking a microscopic bonfire right there in the damp, dark center of your pile. The sheer thermal energy generated by billions of organisms feeding and reproducing simultaneously causes the physical structure of the leaves to literally collapse, weeping out their trapped nutrients and turning black in a matter of days. You're not really waiting for the leaves to rot in the traditional sense. You are actively pre-digesting them. By grasping this beautifully simple natural mechanism, we can completely bypass the frustratingly long wait and jump straight to the dark, crumbly finish line. Does it not make perfect sense that if you actively control the microbial workforce, you completely command the timeline of decay? Why do we willingly pour synthetic laboratory-made chemical accelerators onto the very soil that grows the food feeding our families? For decades, we have been aggressively conditioned to believe that nature is somehow inherently flawed and agonizingly slow, requiring a heavy, expensive dose of harsh chemical intervention to function properly. You walk into any major garden center today, and you are immediately confronted with endless rows of brightly colored plastic jugs and heavy bags, all promising to rapidly rot your compost or instantly green your plants. But have you ever actually stopped to read those terrifying warning labels and asked yourself what exactly you are introducing into your delicate backyard ecosystem? These commercial compost starters and synthetic urea fertilizers act like a destructive ecological bomb, delivering a short-term burst of extreme heat while simultaneously scorching and sterilizing the precious native microbiology of your soil. They are essentially highly addictive fast food for your garden, creating an immediate visual spike, but leaving the earth deeply depleted, lifeless, and dependent in the long run. Why trade the enduring health of your garden for a fleeting, chemically induced reaction when true lasting power is already resting right outside your door? When you use the natural microbial liquid we are discussing, you are not violently burning the organic matter with caustic synthetic nitrogen. You are harmonizing with the ancient, profound intelligence of the forest floor. Imagine the sterile, burning smell of those chemical aisles, and compare that to the rich, earthy, sweet aroma of a thriving, active microbial brew. You are introducing a living, breathing community of beneficial organisms that will not only melt those stubborn, dead autumn leaves, but will actively stay behind to fiercely protect your plant roots from devastating diseases and severe drought. The synthetic chemical approach arrogantly attempts to dominate and force nature into submission, while our raw biological method humbly partners with it, unleashing a cascading, beautiful cycle of regenerative life. We are replacing a sterile, toxic transaction with a deeply vibrant, living relationship. Is it not time we finally walk away from the expensive synthetic illusion sold by massive corporations and return to the deeply authentic, living biology that has successfully sustained towering wild ecosystems for millions of years without a single drop of artificial fertilizer? Now it is time for you to roll up your sleeves and actually brew this magnificent biological potion right in your own kitchen, using nothing more than a few incredibly basic household staples that you probably already have sitting in your pantry. You're going to start the process by taking a cup of ordinary uncooked rice and rinsing it vigorously in a jar of fresh, clean water until that water becomes a distinctly cloudy, milky white color. That deeply cloudy liquid is absolutely packed with complex carbohydrates and acts as the perfect initial biological magnet to attract the wild ambient microbes floating invisibly through the air all around your home. You will carefully pour that starchy wash water into a clean glass jar, cover it simply with a breathable paper towel or a piece of thin cotton cloth secured tightly by a rubber band, and let it rest quietly in a dark, warm corner of your house for roughly 2 to 3 days. During this brief waiting period, those wild indigenous microorganisms are diving headfirst into the jar and beginning to greedily feast on the starches, creating a slightly sour but pleasantly earthy smell that tells your senses the invisible magic has officially begun. Once you look closely and notice a distinct physical separation in the liquid with a thin, delicate film forming on the very top surface, you are completely ready for the second crucial phase of our natural extraction. You are going to take exactly 1 part of this actively fermented rice water and combine it with 10 parts of regular milk in a much larger glass container. The milk is not just food, it acts as a highly specific biological filter because the particular lactic acid bacteria we desperately need for aggressively breaking down tough autumn leaves will rapidly consume the milk sugars and multiply exponentially while completely outcompeting and suppressing all the other random, weaker microbes. After another short week of resting undisturbed in the dark, you will return to find a thick, solid cheese, like curd, floating majestically on the surface, leaving a beautifully clear, yellowish serum resting directly underneath it. That golden serum is the pure, concentrated, microscopic army you have been patiently waiting to harvest. You simply scoop off those solid top curds, which you can toss to your chickens or bury in the garden, and carefully strain out that precious yellow liquid into a clean bottle to preserve this hyperactive biological workforce and keep them safely alive for many months. You must mix that fresh serum with an equal amount of rich, dark brown sugar or thick, sticky, black molasses. The heavy sugar content essentially puts these aggressive microscopic workers into a deep biological suspended animation, safely storing their explosive digestive power on a shelf until the exact moment you are ready to wake them up and unleash them upon your towering piles of dead backyard leaves. If you're sitting there thinking that this sounds entirely too good to be true, you are certainly not alone, because I was highly skeptical myself until I saw the undeniable proof pouring in from backyard gardeners just like you. Let me tell you about Sarah, a passionate organic grower from the cold northern suburbs who completely transformed her frustrating relationship with the towering oak trees in her yard. Oak leaves are notoriously stubborn, heavily loaded with thick, resilient tannins that naturally repel decomposition, often sitting completely unchanged in a damp pile for well over 3 full seasons. Last autumn, Sarah decided to stop fighting nature and instead drenched her massive chest-high pile of dry oak leaves with a diluted batch of our secret biological serum. Exactly 14 days later, she plunged her bare hands into the center of that pile and was utterly shocked to find that the volume had violently collapsed by an astonishing 60%. The core temperature of her leaf mound had spiked beautifully, indicating an absolute frenzy of microscopic feeding, and those thick, leathery oak leaves were already crumbling into dark, earthy fragments when she rubbed them between her fingers. Then there is the incredible case of Marcus, who manages an expansive urban community garden that typically struggles to process the sheer overwhelming volume of autumn yard waste dropped by the surrounding city trees. His team used to spend thousands of dollars hauling away roughly 5 tons of fallen foliage every single November because their traditional compost bins simply could not keep up with the overwhelming supply. Last year, they sprayed their collective mountains of municipal yard waste with a massive batch of this homemade microbial inoculant and covered it tightly with a simple, dark tarp. In precisely 4 short weeks, those seemingly insurmountable 5 tons of crisp, dead matter had been entirely digested by our invisible workforce, leaving behind incredibly rich, dark humus that they immediately spread across all 40 of their raised vegetable beds. They completely eliminated their waste hauling budget while simultaneously producing the most breathtakingly vibrant spring harvest the neighborhood had ever witnessed. These are not isolated, miraculous anomalies happening in a controlled laboratory, but rather everyday people achieving staggering real-world results by simply unleashing the aggressive digestive power of nature. When you look at the sheer weight of this undeniable evidence, you have to ask yourself why you would ever go back to the agonizingly slow and endlessly frustrating methods of the past. Now that you possess this incredibly concentrated biological gold sitting quietly on your shelf, it is time to awaken our microscopic army and unleash them directly onto that frustrating mountain of dry autumn leaves, taking up space in your backyard. You do not want to pour this powerful serum straight out of the jar because it is far too concentrated, and those dormant lactic acid bacteria need a gentle wake-up call before they can start aggressively digesting your yard waste. You are going to take just 1 single tablespoon of your dark, sweet microbial serum and vigorously mix it into an entire gallon of fresh, clean water, preferably rainwater or water that has been sitting out overnight to safely release any harsh municipal chlorine. This massive dilution is not about stretching your supply. It is actually the precise biological trigger that breaks their sugary hibernation and signals to billions of hungry microbes that it is finally time to eat. Walk out to your towering pile of dry, crunchy leaves and begin spraying or pouring this awakened liquid generously over every single layer, making absolutely sure that the foliage is deeply dampened, but not completely soaking wet like a swamp. You want to imagine that you are effectively coating every individual leaf in an invisible living armor of aggressive indigenous workers who are immediately sinking their microscopic teeth into those rigid cellular walls. Once your entire pile is thoroughly drenched in this life-giving mixture, you must cover the whole mound tightly with an ordinary dark plastic tarp to lock in the rapidly building heat and completely block out the sterilizing ultraviolet rays of the harsh autumn sun. That dark, humid environment underneath the tarp is precisely where the true biological magic happens, because it perfectly mimics the primal shaded stomach of the ancient forest floor. Within just 24 to 48 hours, if you slide your bare hand deep into the center of that covered pile, you will be absolutely astonished by the intense radiating heat generated entirely by billions of invisible organisms, furiously multiplying and ripping apart the tough carbon structures. You are no longer just a gardener helplessly watching the seasons pass you by, but rather an active master conductor orchestrating a violent, beautiful symphony of natural decay right in your own backyard. As you stand there looking down at this steaming dark pile of newly transformed earth, you are no longer just a gardener, but a true steward of an ancient biological legacy that has sustained our planet since the very beginning of life itself. You have successfully taken what the modern world hastily discards as mere yard waste and rapidly transmuted it into the absolute highest form of ecological wealth simply by partnering with the unseen microscopic forces that govern all natural creation to practice truly sustainable gardening. We spend so much of our lives trying to brutally force nature into neat, sterile little boxes, aggressively fighting the very processes that are designed to bring us breathtaking abundance and deep resilience. By taking a step back and choosing to brew this simple rustic liquid in your kitchen, you have broken the endless expensive cycle of relying on giant corporations to artificially manage your soil health and embraced a method that I deeply hope inspires you to try this natural approach yourself. You have reclaimed the deeply empowering indigenous wisdom of Dr. Cho and proven to yourself that the most profound technologies on Earth do not come out of a sterile chemical laboratory, but rather emerge quietly from the damp, dark intelligence of the forest floor. The dark, crumbly compost you are about to spread across your garden beds is completely infused with your own intentional energy, and it will go on to grow the most fiercely vibrant, nutrient-dense food your family has ever tasted. But beyond the incredible harvest and the immense saving of physical labor, this profound biological journey leaves us standing at the edge of a much deeper realization about our specific place in the natural order. If billions of invisible microorganisms can completely dismantle our toughest problems and harmoniously transform death into vibrant new life in just a matter of days when given the right environment, what other magnificent unseen forces are just waiting for us to finally stop fighting them and start collaborating with them?